All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into one of the oldest, most terrifying monsters humanity has ever dreamed up.
So you have to ask, right? Is the vampire just some modern invention, something dreamed up for Gothic novels, or is it something way, way older? Something that's been lurking in the shadows of our history for centuries? Well, let's find out.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start by tracing the myth's origins. Then we'll take a look at some ancient blood drinkers from all over the world. After that, we'll dive into a real-life panic that swept across Europe. We'll even meet the man who inspired the most famous vampire of them all. And finally, we're going to ask the big question. Why does this story just refuse to die?
Okay, first things first, let's talk about the word itself, vampire. Where did it even come from? You know, as a historian, one of the first things I do is track a word's origin, because it almost always tells you something deeper about the story. And believe me, vampire is no exception.
So here's the crazy thing. The word vampire is actually pretty new. It doesn't really pop up in Western languages until it's borrowed from Slavic folklore, and that's pretty late in the game. But, and this is the key part, the idea, the terrifying concept of a creature that steals life by drinking blood, oh, that's ancient, and it's everywhere.
So, let's do this. Let's take a little trip back in time, a global tour of the ancient world, and see how this exact same fear showed up in all these different, terrifying forms, long, long before anyone ever used the word vampire.
Let's start in Mesopotamia, one of the cradles of civilization. Here, we find stories about Lilith. And she was absolutely terrifying, a demonic queen who went after the most vulnerable people imaginable, children. She really represented this deep, primal fear of the dark and whatever monsters might be hiding in it.
Okay, now let's jump over to Egypt. There you have the ferocious, lion-headed goddess Sekhmet. She basically personified the connection between bloodshed and divine power. So in this case, bloodlust wasn't just some monstrous thing. It was seen as a force of nature. It was literally a tool of the gods.
And then you've got the ancient Greeks. They gave us stories about creatures like Ampusa, a shape-shifting demon who could appear as a beautiful woman to lure in her victims. And this right here, this is a huge piece of the puzzle. It's where we first really see that powerful link between desire and danger, seduction and, well, death. Meanwhile, all the way over in India, ancient Sanskrit texts talk about the Vatala and the Pishacha. I mean, these things were nightmare fuel. They could possess corpses, control your mind, and they were almost impossible to kill. This really taps into that deep fear of your own body being violated, even after you're gone. Okay, so when you put them all side by side like this, you start to see a pattern emerge, don't you? It doesn't matter if it's Mesopotamia, Egypt, or India. The core anxiety is exactly the same. It's this fear of a predator that looks human but steals something essential from us. Not just our life, but our vitality, our very essence. And that essence is almost always represented by blood. So you see, this is way more than just a scary monster story. It's a story about these really deep human fears of, say, contagion and violation. So you have this ancient global fear simmering for thousands of years, and then it just boils over. It becomes this mass hysteria in a very specific time and place. And that brings us to a period that historians actually call the Great Vampire Panic.
Now here's what's so wild about this. We're talking about the early 1700s. This is the age of enlightenment, right? The age of reason, of science. You'd think these old superstitions would just kind of fade away. But no. The exact opposite happened. The belief in vampires didn't just linger, it exploded. And we're not just talking about village rumors here. This escalated to the point of official government investigations.
To really get a sense of this, let's zoom in on one of the most famous and creepiest cases that really ignited this whole firestorm. It's the well-documented, terrifying account of a Serbian farmer named Peter Plogojevich.
All right, so the story goes like this. Peter dies and is buried. But then, his own son claims that his father's ghost came back asking for food. For 2 nights, the terrified son gives him what he wants, but on the 3rd night, he says no. The very next morning, the son is found dead, and the official report says his body was completely drained of blood.
And it didn't stop there, not even close. Over the next week, it was like a plague hit the village. 9 more people fell ill and died, one after the other. And as they were dying, they all told the exact same horrifying story. Peter Plogojevich had attacked them in their sleep.
Okay, this is the part of the story that's just mind-blowing.
The panic gets so bad that an imperial official from the government is sent to investigate. He personally oversees the exhumation of Peter's body. And in his official written report, this is a legal document, mind you, he describes what they found. The body hadn't decomposed at all. It looked like his hair and nails had kept growing. And the most chilling detail, there was fresh blood on his mouth and clothes.
It's because of official reports like this one that people developed this grim but very specific, almost scientific procedure for dealing with the undead. This wasn't just a bunch of angry villagers with pitchforks. To them, this was a logical, necessary series of steps you had to take to neutralize a very real threat and protect your community.
So this is the crucial turning point. You have this incredibly rich and terrifying folklore that's been around for ages, and eventually it collides with a real and, frankly, just as terrifying historical figure. And that collision, that's what creates the vampire that we all know today. And it's just fascinating to see how seriously this was taken. I mean, even at the highest levels of power. We're talking about the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over this whole region. They actually had their top religious scholars issue official decrees, fatwas, on the proper legal way to handle vampires. Think about that. They were validating the fear and writing it into law.
And this is where we get to the big name, Dracula. This chart just lays it out so perfectly. On one side, you have the real guy, Vlad III. He was called Dracula because his dad was in the Order of the Dragon, Dracul. He was a real-life prince, a brutal warlord fighting the Ottomans. He was a man. But on the other side, you have Count Dracula, the myth, the immortal, undead monster from a novel. Two totally different things that got mashed together.
I mean, the real Vlad's cruelty was so extreme it was almost theatrical. This guy famously impaled an estimated 20,000 of his enemies on stakes outside his city. The sight was so horrifying it supposedly made the invading sultan turn back. So when you hear stories like that, plus the rumors that he'd dine among the dying and dip bread in their blood, well, you can see why he was the perfect historical figure to attach all that pre-existing vampire folklore to.
Which, of course, brings us to our final and maybe biggest question. We've traced this story across thousands of years and all around the globe. So why? Why this monster? Why has the vampire held on to our imagination for so long?
I mean, think about the journey we've just taken. The vampire has evolved so much. It started as this terrifying night demon in Mesopotamia, then it became a shambling, plague-spreading corpse in a village graveyard, and finally it morphed into that sophisticated, charming aristocrat in a castle. The look changes, but the core fear, that stays exactly the same. It's the fear of a predator that looks just like us, a predator that used to be one of us, and whose only goal is to turn us into one of them.
So maybe the real reason this story never dies isn't because we're afraid of monsters hiding in the dark. Maybe it's because the vampire is a kind of dark mirror, reflecting things we're afraid of in ourselves. You know, our fear of disease, our own capacity for cruelty, our deep anxieties about death and what comes after. The final question we should be asking isn't, are vampires real? The real question is, what does our centuries-long obsession with them tell us about ourselves?